The rain came down in sheets that November evening, turning the parking lot of the discount grocery store into a maze of puddles that reflected the flickering neon sign above. Marcus Webb stood at the checkout counter, his worn wallet open, counting crumpled bills with careful precision. At 3 feet 9 inches tall, he had to stretch slightly to place the money on the counter, a gesture he'd made thousands of times without thinking. The cashier, a tired woman with kind eyes, gave him a gentle smile as she bagged his groceries, mostly pasta, canned vegetables, and a single box of strawberry cereal that his daughter loved. "Have a good night, Mr. Webb," she said, and Marcus nodded, grateful for the small kindness in her voice. In a world that often looked past him or stared too long, these moments of simple human decency meant everything. He pushed through the glass doors into the cold rain, his groceries clutched against his chest. The bus stop was 2 blocks away, and though his legs ached from a double shift at the warehouse where he sorted packages, he walked with purpose. His daughter, Emma, was waiting at home with Mrs. Chen, the elderly neighbor who watched her for a few dollars and leftover dinner. Emma was 7 years old, with wild curls that never stayed in their ponytails, and a gap-toothed smile that could light up the darkest room. She was his entire world, the reason he woke up at 5 every morning and came home exhausted every night. The apartment building where they lived was old, with paint peeling from the hallway walls and a radiator that clanked but barely worked. Marcus had moved them there 3 years ago, after Emma's mother had left without warning, leaving only a note that said she couldn't do this anymore, couldn't be tied down, couldn't handle the stairs, couldn't pretend their life together was what she'd imagined. She'd never mentioned Marcus's height in the note, but he knew it was part of the equation, one more thing that made their family different in a world that demanded conformity. He'd raised Emma alone since then, and though money was tight and the nights were long, they had something precious. They had each other. Emma never saw her father as small. To her, he was the strongest person in the world, the one who made pancakes on Sunday mornings, who read her stories with different voices for each character, who kissed her scraped knees and told her she was braver than any superhero. Marcus climbed the stairs to their 3rd-floor apartment, his breath coming harder with each step. He could hear voices before he reached the door, louder than they should be. Mrs. Chen's voice, high and distressed, and another voice, unfamiliar, sharp and aggressive. He fumbled with his keys, his heart beginning to race. The door swung open, and the scene that greeted him made his blood turn cold. 3 men stood in his small living room. One was rifling through the drawer where Marcus kept their documents, birth certificates, rent receipts, his work ID. Another stood by the window, arms crossed, acting as lookout. The third, the largest of them, had Mrs. Chen backed against the wall, his hand on her shoulder in a grip that made the old woman wince. And there, in the corner by her bedroom door, was Emma. Her face was streaked with tears, her small body trembling. When she saw her father, she let out a cry that shattered something deep in Marcus's chest. "Daddy, they're hurting Mrs. Chen. They're hurting my mom." The slip of her words, calling the neighbor mom in her panic, hit Marcus like a physical blow. But there was no time to process it. The man by the drawer turned, and his eyes landed on Marcus with a mixture of surprise and dismissive amusement. "Well, look who's home," he said, his voice dripping with mock cheerfulness. "We were just having a conversation with your babysitter here about some money your former roommate owes us." Marcus's mind raced. Former roommate. That would be Derek, a guy who'd stayed with them for 2 months last year when Marcus had needed help with rent. Derek had seemed decent enough at first, but he'd left abruptly, and Marcus had later found out he'd been involved in things Marcus wanted no part of. "Derek doesn't live here anymore," Marcus said, keeping his voice steady, though his hands shook. He set the groceries down slowly. "And I don't know anything about any money. You need to leave, now." The large man holding Mrs. Chen laughed, a sound without humor. "You don't give orders here, little man. We'll leave when we're ready." Marcus felt the familiar sting of that phrase, little man, used not as description but as dismissal, as if his size negated his humanity, his authority in his own home. But that pain was nothing compared to the fear he felt watching Emma's terrified face. "Please," Marcus said, hating the desperation in his voice but unable to stop it. My daughter is here. Whatever Derek owes you, take it up with him. We have nothing to do with it. The man at the drawer pulled out Marcus's checkbook, flipping through it mockingly. Pretty slim pickings here. You don't look like you could cover Derek's debt if you saved for a year. Then you know I can't help you, Marcus said. Let Mrs. Chen go. Let us be. I'll give you whatever cash I have. It's not much, but it's yours. Just leave us alone. For a moment, the room hung in terrible suspension. Then the large man shoved Mrs. Chen aside, not violently, but hard enough that she stumbled, and took a step toward Marcus. Here's what's going to happen, he said. You're going to tell us how to reach Derek, or we're going to make this very uncomfortable for everyone here. Starting with... He didn't finish the sentence because Emma moved. She darted from her corner, placing her small body between the man and her father, her arms spread wide as if she could shield Marcus from anything. "Don't hurt my daddy!" she screamed, her voice raw with a child's fierce protectiveness. "He's good. He didn't do anything. Just go away." The sight of his daughter, so small and vulnerable, standing up to someone 5 times her size broke something in Marcus. In that moment, every bit of restraint, every instinct to de-escalate, every learned behavior of making himself smaller to avoid conflict, all of it evaporated. He moved faster than he'd ever moved in his life. Years of physical labor had made him stronger than people expected, and he used every ounce of that strength now. He grabbed the man's wrist and twisted with a force born of pure desperation, causing him to stumble backward. Then Marcus did something he'd never done before in his life. He positioned himself directly in front of Emma and Mrs. Chen, and met the man's shocked gaze with eyes that burned. "Touch my daughter again," Marcus said, his voice no longer shaking, "and you'll regret it. I don't care about your size. I don't care about Derek or his debts. You came into my home. You threatened my family, and I will protect them with everything I have." The conviction in his voice must have carried weight, because the 3 men exchanged glances. The one at the window spoke up. "Man, this isn't worth it. Derek's probably 3 states away by now." But the large man wasn't ready to back down. He stepped forward again, and Marcus braced himself, knowing he was outmatched but unwilling to move, unwilling to let them past him to the people he loved. What happened next occurred so fast it seemed almost unreal. The apartment door burst open. Marcus had left it unlocked in his rush, and suddenly the room filled with new people. Mr. Patterson from downstairs, a retired Marine who'd always been friendly, 2 younger men Marcus recognized from the building. And behind them, to Marcus's shock, 3 police officers. Mrs. Chen had managed to trigger the emergency pendant she wore around her neck, a device her son had insisted she carry. The signal had gone to building security and the police simultaneously. The would-be collectors scattered, or tried to. One made it to the window before Mr. Patterson blocked his path. The others were grabbed by the officers with efficient professionalism. In less than 3 minutes, all 3 were in handcuffs being read their rights, while the officers took statements from everyone present. Marcus sank to his knees, and Emma rushed into his arms, sobbing into his shoulder. He held her tight, feeling her heartbeat against his chest, whispering over and over that she was safe, that everything was okay now, that he was here. Mrs. Chen knelt beside them, her own eyes wet, and placed a trembling hand on Emma's back. "You are so brave," she whispered. "Both of you." The police officer taking Marcus's statement was a woman with gray-streaked hair and eyes that had seen too much. She listened carefully, took notes, and then did something unexpected. She crouched down to Marcus's eye level. "You did everything right," she said quietly. "You protected your family. That took real courage." The words, simple as they were, meant more than she could know. That night, after the police had left with their prisoners, after neighbors had checked on them, and Mr. Patterson had secured their door with a new lock he installed himself, Marcus sat on Emma's bed while she drifted toward sleep. "Daddy?" she murmured, her eyes already half closed. "Yes, sweetheart." "You were like a superhero tonight. You weren't scared at all." Marcus stroked her curls, his heart aching with love for this child who believed in him so completely. "I was terrified," he admitted softly. But being brave doesn't mean not being scared. It means being scared and doing what needs to be done anyway. You were brave too. So brave. I couldn't let them hurt you, Emma said, her voice drowsy. You're my daddy. You're the best daddy in the whole world. She fell asleep then, her hand clutching his, and Marcus sat there in the dim glow of her nightlight, thinking about what had happened, about the moment when his daughter had called Mrs. Chen Mom, about how close they'd come to disaster, about how fragile their small, precious life was. The next morning brought unexpected visitors. A local reporter had heard about the incident from a police scanner, home invasion thwarted by disabled man protecting his daughter. But when the reporter, a young woman named Sarah Chen, no relation to Mrs. Chen, showed up at their door with a cameraman, Marcus almost sent her away. I'm not disabled, he said, the word sitting uncomfortably in his mouth. I'm just short. Sarah had the grace to look embarrassed. I apologize. That was poor wording. But Mr. Webb, what you did was remarkable. A single father standing up to armed intruders to protect his family. That's a story people need to hear. Why? Marcus asked, genuinely curious. People protect their families every day. That's just what you do. Not everyone, Sarah said softly. And not everyone faces the extra challenges you face. May I come in? Just to talk? Against his better judgment, Marcus let her in. Emma was at school, and he had the day off, a rare occurrence that felt like both a blessing and a curse after the night they'd had. Sarah sat at their small kitchen table, declining coffee but accepting water, and she asked him questions that no one had ever asked him before. Not about his height, about his life, about raising Emma alone. About what it meant to be a father, about love and sacrifice and hope. Marcus found himself talking, really talking, for the first time in years. He told her about Emma's mother leaving, about the looks he got at parent-teacher conferences, about the time another parent had asked if he was Emma's brother and seemed horrified when he said he was her father. He told her about the warehouse job that paid minimum wage but had benefits, about skipping lunch some days so Emma could have dance lessons, about reading the same 3 library books over and over because they couldn't afford to buy new ones. But he also told her about the joy, about Emma's laughter, about Sunday morning pancakes, about the way she held his hand when they walked to school, about how she'd drawn a picture in kindergarten of her family and made him taller than the house because, "You're the biggest person in my heart, Daddy." When he finished, Sarah was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, "I'd like to tell your story. Not because you're a dwarf, I know that's the correct term, but because you're a father who loves his daughter and who showed incredible courage. Would you let me do that?" Marcus thought about it. His first instinct was to say no, to retreat back into the privacy and safety of anonymity. But then he thought about Emma, about how she'd stood in front of him last night, arms spread wide, protecting him just as he'd protected her. He thought about teaching her to be brave, to stand up, to take up space in the world even when the world tried to make her small. "Okay," he said, "but on one condition. You talk to Emma too. Let her tell her side. This isn't just my story, it's hers." The segment aired a week later on the local news. Marcus and Emma sat on their worn couch, Mrs. Chen beside them, and watched themselves on screen. Sarah had done something remarkable. She'd told their story with dignity and heart, focusing not on Marcus's height but on his character, not on their struggles but on their strength. The interview with Emma was the heart of the piece. She sat in her bedroom, surrounded by her stuffed animals, and spoke with the unself-conscious honesty of childhood. "My daddy is the best person I know," she said to the camera. "He works really hard, and sometimes he's tired, but he always has time for me. He reads me stories and makes me laugh and tucks me in every night. When those bad men came, I wasn't going to let them hurt him, because he's my daddy, and I love him more than anything." "What would you want people to know about your dad?" Sarah's voice asked from off-camera. Emma thought about it, her face serious. "I want them to know that being short doesn't make him small. He has the biggest heart of anyone, and he's my hero." The segment ended with footage Marcus hadn't known was being filmed. Him and Emma at the park near their apartment. Her on the swings with him pushing her, both of them laughing. The camera caught the way other parents watched them, some with curiosity, some with confusion, one or two with clear judgment. But it also caught the way Marcus and Emma existed in their own bubble of joy, immune to the stares, lost in each other's company. The response was overwhelming. By the next morning, the local station's Facebook page was flooded with comments. Most were supportive, expressing admiration for Marcus and love for Emma. But there were darker comments too, cruel jokes about his height, questions about whether he was fit to be a father, suggestions that Emma would be better off with a normal family. Marcus read these comments late at night when Emma was asleep, and each one felt like a small cut. But then he read the other comments, the ones that outweighed the cruelty by hundreds to one. Messages from other single parents saying he inspired them, from people with dwarfism saying they'd never seen someone like them portrayed as a hero on the news, from teachers saying they'd shown the clip to their students as an example of courage and love. And then, 3 days after the segment aired, Marcus got a call that changed everything. It was from a woman named Jennifer Marks who ran a nonprofit organization supporting single parents. She'd seen the news story and wanted to help. Her organization could offer Marcus assistance, help with rent, a small scholarship fund for Emma's education, connections to better job opportunities. "We believe in supporting families," Jennifer said on the phone, "and your family clearly has something special. Would you be willing to meet with us?" The meeting took place the following week at a coffee shop downtown. Jennifer was there with 2 colleagues, and they laid out a proposal that seemed too good to be true. Not charity, they emphasized, but support. A hand up, not a handout. They could help Marcus enroll in night classes at the community college if he wanted to pursue a degree. They could connect him with employers who valued work ethic over appearances. They could provide after-school care for Emma so Marcus wouldn't have to rely solely on Mrs. Chen's kindness. "Why me?" Marcus asked, overwhelmed. "There are thousands of single parents who need help more than I do." Jennifer smiled. "Because you reminded people what matters. In a world that's so obsessed with image and appearance, you showed them that the size of a person's heart is what counts. That resonated with our donors, and they want to support you, if you'll let us." Marcus said yes. Not because he wasn't proud. He was fiercely proud, had always worked for everything he had, but because he thought about Emma, about giving her opportunities he'd never had, about showing her that accepting help wasn't weakness but wisdom. The months that followed brought changes Marcus had never imagined. He enrolled in business management classes at the community college, attending lectures 2 nights a week while Emma was at an after-school program she loved, one that had art classes and a small library and teachers who knew every child's name. His grades were excellent. Studying came easily to someone who'd spent his whole life having to be twice as good to be seen as half as competent. At the warehouse, word had spread about the news segment. Some coworkers who'd barely acknowledged him before started conversations. The manager called him into the office and Marcus braced himself for trouble, but instead was offered a promotion to inventory supervisor, a position that came with a small office, a better salary, and respect. But the most profound changes were the ones that couldn't be measured in money or opportunities. Marcus and Emma became part of a community in a way they'd never been before. Neighbors who'd only nodded politely before now stopped to chat. Mr. Patterson became a regular fixture in their lives, teaching Emma chess and sharing stories from his military days. Mrs. Chen was adopted as an honorary grandmother, joining them for Sunday dinners that Marcus had learned to cook with increasing skill. And people reached out. So many people. Letters arrived from around the country, from other parents with dwarfism, from people who'd felt marginalized or overlooked, from those who simply wanted to say that the story had moved them. Marcus read every letter, and gradually he began to see himself through others' eyes, not as someone to be pitied or dismissed, but as someone who mattered, whose story had value, whose love for his daughter was universal and profound. 6 months after the incident, Sarah Chen called again. A national morning show had seen the local segment and wanted to feature Marcus and Emma. It would mean flying to New York, being on national television, stepping into a spotlight far brighter than anything Marcus had experienced before. His first instinct was to refuse. But Emma, overhearing the conversation, bounced with excitement. "New York, like in the movies." Can we see the big buildings, Daddy? Can we go? Marcus looked at his daughter's shining face and realized something. For years he'd tried to make himself smaller, to avoid attention, to slide through life without causing waves. He'd done it to protect himself from hurt, from judgment, from the constant exhaustion of being different. But in doing so, he'd inadvertently taught Emma to do the same, to hide her light, to not ask for too much, to accept less than she deserved. That night, after Emma was asleep, he stood in his small bathroom and looked at himself in the mirror for a long time. Really looked. Not at his height, but at his face. At the lines around his eyes from smiling at Emma's jokes. At the gray starting to show at his temples from worry and hard work. At the strength in his jaw that came from refusing to give up. "You are enough," he whispered to his reflection. "You have always been enough." They went to New York. The morning show put them up in a hotel that seemed impossibly fancy to both of them, with beds so soft Emma bounced on hers until Marcus warned her she'd go through the ceiling. The green room before the show was filled with people, makeup artists, producers, other guests, and Marcus felt the old anxiety creeping back, the awareness of eyes on him, of being different. But then Emma took his hand and squeezed it 3 times, their secret code for "I love you," and the anxiety faded. He squeezed back 4 times, "I love you too," and smiled down at his daughter. The interview was conducted by a host named Michael Reeves, a man with an easy smile and genuine warmth. He didn't ask invasive questions about Marcus's height or Emma's mother or their financial struggles. Instead, he asked about heroism, about fatherhood, about what it meant to protect the people you love. "You know," Michael said near the end of the segment, "we've had a lot of heroes on this show. Athletes, soldiers, celebrities. But I think true heroism looks like what you did, Marcus. Standing up when it matters most, even when you're afraid. What would you say to other parents watching who might be facing their own challenges?" Marcus thought about it, aware of the cameras, of the millions of people watching, of the weight of the moment. Then he looked at Emma, sitting beside him on the couch, and the answer came easily. "I'd say that love makes you brave," he said. "I'd say that your children don't need you to be perfect. They need you to be present. They need you to show up, even on the hard days, especially on the hard days. They need to see you fall and get back up, struggle and keep going, face fear and push through it. Because that's how they learn to do the same." He paused, then added, "And I'd say that being different isn't a weakness. It's just different. The people who love you won't see your differences as flaws. They'll see you, the person you are, and love you for that." The studio audience applauded, but Marcus barely heard it. He was looking at Emma, at the pride in her eyes, at the way she reached over and hugged him right there on national television, her small arms tight around his neck. After the show aired, something shifted in Marcus's life, in their lives. It wasn't just the opportunities that continued to come, though those were real. Job offers from companies who wanted to show they valued diversity, speaking invitations from parenting groups and disability advocacy organizations, even a book publisher asking if Marcus would consider writing about his experiences. The real shift was internal. Marcus began to walk differently through the world, not taller because that was impossible, but bigger in spirit. He stopped apologizing for taking up space. He stopped over-explaining himself. He learned to meet stares with a calm smile, to answer intrusive questions with dignity or not at all, to choose which battles mattered and which ones he could let roll off his back. And Emma? Emma bloomed. She made friends easily at school, no longer holding back out of fear that her family was too different. She joined the school play and got a part as a woodland creature, and Marcus sat in the front row and cheered louder than any other parent. She started a kindness club at school, inspired by her father's example, where kids committed to standing up for those being bullied or excluded. On Emma's 8th birthday, Marcus threw her a party at their apartment, which they'd been able to move out of, upgrading to a 2-bedroom place with actual heat and a kitchen where all the appliances worked. The living room was packed with kids from school, from the neighborhood, from the after-school program. Parents, too, mingling and chatting, treating Marcus not as a curiosity, but as one of them. Mrs. Chen sat in the corner, watching with misty eyes. Mr. Patterson helped Marcus serve cake. Sarah Chen stopped by with a gift, having become a friend over the months. And Jennifer Marks from the nonprofit came with her own daughter, who'd become one of Emma's best friends. As Marcus stood in his kitchen, watching Emma blow out the candles on her cake while her friends sang, he felt something he hadn't felt in years, maybe ever. Not happiness, though he was happy. Not pride, though he was proud. It was something deeper, more fundamental. He felt peace. He felt whole. He felt like he'd finally arrived at a place where he and Emma belonged, where they were valued, where they were loved not despite their story but because of it, because they'd faced hardship and come through it together, because they'd shown that courage and love could overcome any obstacle. That night, after the party guests had left and the apartment was quiet except for the sound of Emma brushing her teeth, Marcus sat on the couch and thought about that night 6 months ago when 3 men had broken into their home, when Emma had stood in front of him with her arms spread wide, when he'd found a strength he hadn't known he possessed. Emma padded out of the bathroom in her pajamas and climbed onto the couch beside him, fitting perfectly under his arm. "Today was the best birthday ever," she said. "Yeah?" Marcus asked, kissing the top of her head. "Yeah, not because of the presents or the cake or anything, because all my friends were here, and everyone was happy, and you were happy, Daddy. You smile so much more now than you used to." Marcus felt his throat tighten. "Do I?" "Uh-huh. You used to have sad eyes sometimes, even when you were laughing, but now your eyes smile too." She tilted her head up to look at him. What changed? How could he explain it to her? How could he say that he'd spent so much of his life feeling small, not physically but emotionally, spiritually, feeling like he had to shrink himself to fit into a world that wasn't built for him? How could he explain that fear of rejection and judgment had made him cautious, had made him hide, had made him less than he could be? How could he explain that one moment of terror, one instant of having to choose between safety and courage, had cracked something open in him and let the light in? "I guess I realized something," Marcus said slowly. "I realized that the only person who could make me small was me. All those years I thought other people were making me feel that way, with their stares and their comments and their assumptions. But the truth is, I was making myself small. I was hiding. And then one night, when someone threatened you, I couldn't hide anymore. I had to be big, not in body, but in spirit. And once I did that, once I stood up and said no, this far and no further, I realized I'd been capable of that all along. I just hadn't believed it." Emma was quiet for a moment, processing this. Then she said, "You know what I think?" "What's that, sweetheart?" "I think you were always big. I think you just finally let other people see it too." Marcus laughed, a sound of pure joy, and hugged his daughter close. "When did you get so wise?" "I learned from the best," Emma said simply. They sat there together as the evening deepened into night, and Marcus thought about the future, about Emma growing up, about the challenges she'd face, about the person she was becoming. He thought about his own future too, about the business degree he was working toward, about maybe starting his own company one day, something that employed people who'd been overlooked by others, who needed a second chance or a first real opportunity. But mostly, he thought about the present moment, about the warm weight of his daughter against his side, about the home they'd built together, about the community that had embraced them, about the love that filled every corner of their lives. He thought about that little girl's cry that had changed everything. "They're hurting my mom." Emma had been wrong about who Mrs. Chen was, but she'd been right about what mattered: protecting family, standing up to injustice, refusing to let fear win. And Marcus had done the unthinkable. Not because he'd fought off 3 men, though he had. Not because he'd become some kind of hero or celebrity, though that had happened too. The truly unthinkable thing was that he'd let himself be seen, fully, completely, without apology or explanation. He'd let the world see a short man with a huge heart, a single father doing his best, a person who was different, and therefore, in his own way, Extraordinary. He'd let himself take up space. He'd let himself matter. He'd let himself love and be loved without reservation. And in doing so, he'd given Emma the greatest gift a father could give, the example of courage, the model of authentic living, the proof that you could face a world that tried to make you small and still stand tall. So tell me, friend, wherever you are right now, did this story touch something in your heart? I'd love to know where you're watching from. Just drop a comment below and let me know what part of Marcus and Emma's journey moved you most. Was it the moment Emma stood up to protect her father? Or maybe when Marcus finally let himself be seen? Your thoughts mean everything, and hearing from you helps us know what stories matter most. And if this one stayed with you, if it made you think or feel or hope, please hit that like button. It seems like such a small thing, but it helps this story reach more people who might need to hear it, who might need to be reminded that courage comes in all sizes, and that the biggest hearts sometimes live in the bodies the world expects the least from. Thank you for being here. Thank you for listening. And remember, you are enough, exactly as you are.